The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when Marcus Kane realized they'd made a terrible mistake. He stood at the edge of the makeshift corral, watching the woman they'd taken the previous evening. She sat against a fence post, hands bound behind her, dark hair falling across her face, perfectly still. Too still. Like a predator waiting. It had seemed like easy money when Dutton proposed it. Ride into the Apache camp during the trading gathering, snatch one of the women while the warriors were occupied with the horse merchants, demand ransom. Simple. Clean. They'd done it before with settlers' daughters, and those families had paid quickly enough. Why not try it with the Apache? Marcus had been uneasy from the start, but Dutton was persuasive, and Marcus owed him money from a bad card game in Santa Fe. So he'd gone along with it, him and 3 others. Dutton, a man named Pike, and a kid barely 20 called Johnny who thought being an outlaw was romantic. The woman they'd taken had been standing slightly apart from the others, wearing traditional dress but with something different about her bearing. She hadn't screamed when they grabbed her. Hadn't fought. Just looked at each of them with dark eyes that seemed to memorize their faces, then allowed herself to be put on a horse as if she were simply going for a ride. "She's too calm," Marcus had said as they rode away, the sounds of alarm finally rising behind them. "She's smart," Dutton had replied. "Knows fighting won't help. She'll be our ticket to a nice payday." But now, watching her in the pre-dawn darkness, Marcus wasn't so sure. Something about the way she held herself, even bound and captive, spoke of someone who wasn't afraid. Someone who was waiting. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Pike materialized beside him, rifle in hand. The older outlaw had survived 20 years on the wrong side of the law by having good instincts, and right now those instincts were clearly screaming. "That we made a mistake? A big one. You see her hands." Marcus looked closer. The woman's hands, tied behind her back, weren't struggling against the ropes. They were still, relaxed. Like she could slip free any time she wanted but was choosing not to. "We need to let her go," Marcus said. "Right now. Before." "Before what?" Dutton emerged from the old line shack they'd holed up in, stretching. "Before the Apache come? Let them come. We've got her, we've got rifles, and we've got a good defensive position. They want her back, they pay. Simple." "Nothing about this is simple," Pike muttered. "You two getting soft in your old age?" Dutton laughed, but there was an edge to it. He walked over to the woman, squatted down in front of her. "What's your name, sweetheart? Who are you to them? Chief's daughter? Medicine woman. Important enough they'll pay to get you back." The woman raised her head slowly, meeting Dutton's eyes. When she spoke, her English was perfect, barely accented. "My name is Naiche, and you should have asked who I am before you took me. Is that a threat?" Dutton grinned. "Tied up and surrounded by men with guns, and you're threatening me? Not a threat. Information. You asked who I am to them." She paused, and something that might have been pity flickered across her face. "I am the wife of Thomas Blackwood." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. He saw Pike stiffen beside him. Even Johnny, dozing against the shack wall, jerked awake at the name. Thomas Blackwood. The ghost of the territories. The man who'd killed 17 men in a single night in Tombstone when they'd murdered his Apache family. The gunslinger who was said to be half legend, half nightmare, and completely unkillable. "You're lying," Dutton said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Am I?" Naiche tilted her head slightly. "Ask yourself, why was I standing apart from the others? Why did no one try to stop you when you took me? Why did I come so easily?" Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Because she wanted to be taken. She's bait." "Bait for what?" Johnny asked, his young voice cracking. As if in answer, a rifle shot cracked across the desert. The bullet struck the dirt 5 feet in front of Dutton, who scrambled backward with a yelp. "For him," Naiche said calmly. Marcus spun, scanning the landscape. Dawn was just beginning to paint the sky, but the desert was still mostly shadow. Rocks, scrub brush, endless hiding places for a man who knew the land. Another shot. This one hit even closer to Dutton, who was now pressed against the shack wall. "He's toying with us," Pike said, his voice tight. If he wanted us dead, we'd be dead. Show yourself, Dutton shouted into the desert. Come out and face us like a man. He is facing you, Naiche said. You just can't see him. Thomas learned to hunt from my people. He can move like wind, shoot like lightning. And right now, he's deciding which of you dies first. Shut up. Dutton swung his rifle toward her. The next shot wasn't a warning. It took Dutton's rifle out of his hands, the bullet striking the barrel so precisely it spun the weapon away without hitting flesh. Dutton stared at his empty, stinging hands in disbelief. That was for pointing a gun at his wife, Marcus said quietly. The next one won't miss. A figure materialized from the dawn shadows like smoke becoming solid. He was tall, lean, dressed in dark clothes that blended with the landscape. His face was weathered, age indeterminate. He could have been 40 or 60. One hand held a rifle, held with the casual ease of someone for whom guns were extensions of his own body. The other hand rested on a pistol at his hip. But it was his eyes that made Marcus's blood run cold. They were the color of winter sky, pale and cold, and they held the kind of stillness that came from having looked death in the face so many times you'd become intimate with it. Thomas Blackwood had arrived. Gentlemen, he said, his voice surprisingly soft, almost gentle. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Stay back. Johnny raised his rifle with shaking hands. We'll kill her. We'll. He never finished the sentence. Blackwood moved, a blur of motion, and the rifle flew from Johnny's hands before the kid even saw him draw. The shot echoed across the desert, and Johnny collapsed to his knees, clutching his now empty hands, whimpering. No, you won't, Blackwood said, and there was no anger in his voice. Just absolute certainty. Because if you harm one hair on her head, I will make your dying last 3 days. I've done it before. The Comancheros who took my first wife learned what happens when you hurt what's mine. They died screaming for mercy that never came. He took a step forward. Just one step, but Marcus saw Pike and Johnny both flinch backward. Here's what's going to happen, Blackwood continued in that same terrifyingly calm voice. You're going to untie my wife. You're going to give her your canteens, because the desert is unkind to those who travel it without water. Then you're going to walk away. You'll walk east, toward Santa Fe. You won't stop. You won't look back. And if I ever see any of your faces again, anywhere in this territory, I will kill you. No warning. No merci. Just death. And if we don't... Dutton's bravado was crumbling, but he made one last attempt at defiance. Blackwood's expression didn't change. Then I kill you now. Quick and clean, because despite what you've done, you haven't actually hurt her yet. But make no mistake. I came here prepared to kill all of you. The only reason you're still breathing is because Naiche asked me to give you a chance. One chance. This is it. Marcus looked at Pike. The older outlaw nodded slightly. They both knew when they were beaten. Johnny was already edging toward his horse, his nerve completely shattered. Only Dutton remained defiant. You think you can just... Marcus. Blackwood's eyes shifted to him. That's your name, isn't it? I heard one of them call you that. You seem smarter than your friend here. Explain to him what happens if he doesn't walk away. Marcus swallowed hard. Dutton. Let it go. You know who he is. You know what he's done. I know the stories, Dutton spat. Stories get exaggerated. Not his, Pike said quietly. I was in Tombstone. After. I saw what he did to those men. The stories don't do it justice. Blackwood waited, patient as stone. Behind him, the sun was finally breaking the horizon, painting the desert gold and red. It made his shadow stretch long across the ground, reaching toward them like a dark promise. Naiche spoke again, her voice still calm. Thomas. They're just foolish men. They didn't know. Let them go. They took you, Blackwood said, and for the first time, emotion crept into his voice. Not rage. Something deeper and more dangerous. Fear. The fear of a man who'd lost everything once and lived in terror of losing it again. They put their hands on you. They tied you. They made you sit in the dirt all night. And I am fine, as you can see. She smiled slightly. As I knew I would be. Because I knew you would come. The tension in Blackwood's shoulders eased, just fractionally. He looked back at the four men. Untie her. Now. Marcus moved first, approaching Naiche carefully, as if she might bite. His hands shook as he worked the knots. The moment the ropes fell away, Naiche stood fluidly, rubbing her wrists. She walked past Marcus without a glance, straight to Blackwood. He didn't lower his rifle, didn't take his eyes off the four men, but his free hand came up to touch her face gently, checking for injuries. She leaned into the touch for just a moment, then stepped behind him. Thank you for coming quickly, she said. I was following before they'd ridden a mile. Did you think I would let you do this alone? I knew you wouldn't. That's why I left the signs. Marcus realized then how completely they'd been played. The woman had left a trail for her husband to follow. Had probably led them exactly where she wanted them to go. They hadn't captured her at all. They'd been herded like cattle to slaughter. The canteens, Blackwood reminded them. And your guns. Leave them all. You can walk to Santa Fe unarmed. Consider it penance for your stupidity. You can't send us into the desert with nothing. Dutton protested. I can put bullets in you and leave you for the buzzards, Blackwood replied. The choice is yours. They left the guns. All of them. And the canteens, except for one that Blackwood allowed them to share. Then they started walking, Dutton muttering curses under his breath, Pike silent and grim, Johnny sobbing quietly, and Marcus just grateful to be alive. When they'd gone about 100 yards, Blackwood called out one last time. Gentlemen, if I were you, I'd leave the territory entirely. Change your names. Start over somewhere far from here. Because Naiche has brothers. Many brothers. And they're not as merciful as I am. Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He was already mentally planning his route to California, somewhere far from Apache lands and legendary gunslingers and women who turned captivity into a trap. Behind them, as the four men trudged into the rising sun, Thomas Blackwood finally lowered his rifle. He looked at Naiche, his expression transforming from the cold killer to something infinitely softer. That was reckless, he said. What if I hadn't gotten here in time? You're always in time, she replied. She picked up one of the abandoned rifles, checked it expertly, then slung it over her shoulder. Besides, I had a knife hidden in my dress. I could have freed myself any time I wanted. Of course you did. He shook his head, but there was admiration in his eyes. You're going to give me white hair before my time. Too late, she teased, reaching up to touch the silver that was indeed threading through his dark hair. But I love you anyway. Come. My brothers will be worried. We should return to the camp. They know you're safe. I sent word through the smoke signals last night. You've been watching all night. Did you think I'd sleep while you were in their hands? He caught her hand, pressed it to his lips. I would burn the world down before I let anyone hurt you, Naiche. You know this. I know. It's why I wasn't afraid. Not for a moment. She smiled. Though next time some foolish white men want to kidnap an Apache woman for ransom, perhaps we should warn them first. Save everyone the trouble. Where would be the fun in that? Thomas asked, and finally he smiled. It transformed his face, making him look younger, almost boyish. Besides, they needed to learn a lesson. Now they'll spread the story. Maybe the next group of idiots will think twice. They walked back toward the Apache camp, his arm around her shoulders, her head against his chest. Behind them, the sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of night. And in the distance, four men walked east. Forever changed by the morning, they learned a simple truth. Some women were protected not by walls or weapons, but by the absolute certainty of retribution. When you stole from a man like Thomas Blackwood, you weren't just risking his wrath. You were inviting death itself to your doorstep. And death, they had learned, was patient, precise, and utterly merciless. The story of that morning spread quickly through the territories. It was told in saloons and trading posts, around campfires and in sheriff's offices. The tale of 4 idiots who kidnapped the wrong Apache woman and lived to tell about it. Barely. Marcus Kane did make it to California. He bought a small farm, married a widow with 2 children, and never touched a gun again. On quiet nights, he still had nightmares about pale eyes in the dawn and a voice promising death. Pike disappeared entirely, last seen boarding a ship in San Francisco bound for Alaska. Johnny went back to his family in Missouri and became a schoolteacher, spending the rest of his life as far from adventure as possible. Dutton's fate was different. He didn't learn his lesson. 6 months later, he tried to rob a stagecoach in Apache territory. His body was found 3 days later. He'd been shot once, through the heart, at impossible range. No one ever knew who killed him, but everyone who heard the story had the same thought. Thomas Blackwood kept his promises. And in the years that followed, the kidnapping of Apache women in that territory stopped completely. Not because of laws or military intervention, but because of a simple understanding that spread through the criminal element like wildfire. Some women were untouchable. Not because they were weak and needed protection, but because they were loved by men who would burn the world to keep them safe. And the smartest thing an outlaw could do was learn to recognize them before making a fatal mistake. Naiche and Thomas lived for many more years, their legend growing with each passing season. She taught him more of her people's ways. He taught their children to shoot and track. Together, they walked between 2 worlds, belonging fully to neither but creating their own space where love mattered more than blood or color or past. And every year, on the anniversary of that dawn when 4 men learned their lesson, Thomas would present Naiche with a new rope, a reminder of the bonds that couldn't hold her, and the bond between them that nothing could break.